In the heart of New York City, nestled between towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, stood the Gilded Fork, an ultra-luxurious restaurant known for its exquisite food, impeccable service, and strict dress code. The restaurant catered to the elite, celebrities, millionaires, politicians, and socialites who craved not just a meal but an experience. Its reputation was built on exclusivity, and the staff prided themselves on maintaining that image. Every guest who entered through its golden doors was scrutinized from head to toe, ensuring only those who fit their standards were allowed inside. It was a chilly Friday evening when the calm rhythm of the restaurant was disrupted by an unexpected visitor. A young boy, no older than 12 or 13, walked into the grand lobby. His clothes were simple, a pair of faded jeans, a worn-out hoodie, and sneakers that looked like they had seen better days. He carried himself with quiet confidence, but his appearance immediately set off alarm bells among the staff. The luxurious chandeliers above cast a warm glow over the polished marble floors, yet the boy's presence felt out of place in this world of opulence. The hostess, a tall woman with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard in hand, approached him with a polite but dismissive smile. "Good evening," she said, her tone clipped. "Do you have a reservation?" The boy shook his head. "No, ma'am," he replied softly. "I'm not here to eat. I just need to deliver something important." The hostess frowned, glancing down at his scruffy sneakers before meeting his gaze again. "I'm sorry," she said firmly, "but we have a strict dress code here. You'll need to leave." The boy hesitated, clutching a small envelope tightly in his hand. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the lavish surroundings, the gilded mirrors, the crystal glasses sparkling on pristine white tablecloths, and the elegantly dressed patrons sipping champagne. Despite the intimidating atmosphere, he didn't back down. Instead, he took a deep breath and spoke again. "Please, ma'am," he said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "This is really important. It's for Mr. Harrison." At the mention of Richard Harrison, the owner of the Gilded Fork and one of the wealthiest men in the city, the hostess raised an eyebrow. She exchanged a glance with the maitre d', who quickly stepped forward. "Listen, kid," the maitre d' said sharply. "This isn't some playground. We don't allow just anyone to wander in here claiming they have business with Mr. Harrison. Do you even know who he is?" The boy nodded earnestly. "Yes, sir. My dad told me everything about him. Please, I just need to give him this." He held up the envelope, which looked slightly crumpled from being gripped so tightly. By now, a small crowd of staff members had gathered, curious about the commotion. One waiter whispered sarcastically to another, "Looks like someone thinks fame runs in the family." Another employee muttered under their breath, "Kids these days think they can get away with anything." Their comments stung, but the boy ignored them. He knew what he had come to do, and nothing, not even the mocking stares or harsh words, would stop him. Seeing that the boy wasn't budging, the maitre d' turned to the manager, who had been alerted to the situation. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, adjusting his tie as he surveyed the scene. "This boy refuses to leave," the maitre d' explained. "He claims he has something for Mr. Harrison, but clearly he doesn't belong here." The manager sighed, clearly annoyed. "Fine," he said, gesturing toward the boy. "Let's hear him out. If it's nonsense, security will escort him out." With that, the boy was led to a private office at the back of the restaurant. The manager followed closely behind, his expression skeptical. Once inside, he gestured for the boy to sit, though the chair seemed too big for his small frame. "All right," the manager said, crossing his arms. "What exactly do you have for Mr. Harrison?" Without saying a word, the boy handed over the envelope. The manager opened it carefully, pulling out a single sheet of paper. At first glance, it appeared to be a handwritten note. As he read the contents, however, his eyebrows shot up in surprise. Alongside the note was a photograph, a faded picture of the boy standing beside a man who bore a striking resemblance to Richard Harrison himself. The note read, "Dear Richard, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer around. Please, take care of my son, Isaac. He's your nephew, and I trust you more than anyone else. Enclosed is proof of inheritance and documentation verifying his identity. The manager stared at the photo, then at the boy, struggling to process what he was seeing. Could this scruffy teenager really be related to the billionaire restaurateur? Was this some elaborate prank, or was there truth to the boy's story? Before he could ask any questions, the boy spoke up. "My name is Isaac," he said quietly. "My dad passed away last month. Before he died, he told me to come here if anything ever happened to him. He said you'd know what to do." The manager felt a lump form in his throat. For years, rumors had circulated about Richard Harrison having a estranged brother who had moved abroad decades ago. No one knew much about him, but the resemblance between Isaac and Richard was undeniable. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the manager picked up the phone and dialed Richard's personal number. After explaining the circumstances, he arranged for Richard to return to the restaurant immediately. While waiting, the manager couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had escalated. Just moments ago, the staff had treated Isaac like an unwelcome intruder. Now it seemed possible that he might be the heir to half of Richard Harrison's vast fortune. As the minutes ticked by, Isaac sat silently, his hands clasped together, in his lap. Despite the hostility he had faced earlier, there was a sense of calm about him. He had done what his father had asked, and now all he could do was wait. Outside the office, whispers spread like wildfire among the staff. Some expressed disbelief while others began to feel guilty for their earlier behavior. Little did they know, their actions or lack thereof were about to change their lives forever. And so the stage was set for a revelation that would challenge everything they thought they knew about appearances, assumptions, and the true meaning of class. The atmosphere in the Gilded Fork was tense as the staff waited for Richard Harrison to arrive. Whispers filled the air, each employee trying to piece together what had happened. Some speculated that the boy, Isaac, was a con artist attempting to scam their boss out of his fortune. Others wondered if this was some kind of publicity stunt orchestrated by the restaurant's management. No one could agree on anything except one thing. They all felt uneasy about how they had treated him earlier. Meanwhile, Isaac sat patiently in the manager's office, staring at the floor. He didn't seem bothered by the chaos outside, or the fact that his fate now rested in the hands of a man he barely knew. His thoughts were elsewhere, drifting back to memories of his father. Life hadn't been easy for them after his mother passed away when he was just a toddler. They had moved from city to city, living paycheck to paycheck, but his father had always made sure Isaac knew where he came from and who his family was. "Your uncle is a good man," his father had once told him during one of their late-night talks. "If anything ever happens to me, you go straight to him. He'll take care of you." At the time, Isaac hadn't understood why his dad spoke with such certainty. After all, Richard Harrison was practically a stranger to him. But now, sitting in this opulent restaurant surrounded by people who clearly judged him based on his clothes, Isaac clung to those words like a lifeline. His father had trusted Richard, and Isaac intended to honor that trust. About half an hour later, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway. Moments later, the door to the office swung open, revealing Richard Harrison himself. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, the billionaire strode into the room with an air of authority that commanded attention. Yet, as soon as his eyes landed on Isaac, his confident demeanor faltered. For several seconds, Richard simply stood there, frozen in place. His gaze shifted between the boy and the photograph the manager had handed him upon his arrival. The resemblance was uncanny. The same dark hair, the same sharp jawline, and most notably the same piercing blue eyes that Richard saw every morning in the mirror. It can't be," Richard whispered hoarsely, his voice trembling with emotion. He took a step closer to Isaac, studying him intently. "Isaac!" The boy nodded shyly, his cheeks flushing red. "Hi, Uncle Richard," he said softly, almost hesitantly. Richard staggered backward, sinking into the nearest chair as if his legs had given way beneath him. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision. He reached out instinctively, grabbing the edge of the desk to steady himself. Memories flooded back, memories of his younger brother James, whom he hadn't seen in over 2 decades. Back then, James had been full of life, always cracking jokes and dreaming big. But their relationship had soured after a bitter argument over inheritance money left behind by their parents. James had accused Richard of greed, while Richard had called James irresponsible. In the end, James had packed his bags and moved abroad, cutting off all contact. And now, here was Isaac, a living reminder of the brother Richard had lost touch with. Guilt washed over him like a tidal wave. How many times had he thought about reaching out to James over the years? And how many times had he convinced himself it was too late? James is... Richard began, his voice breaking. He's gone? Isaac nodded again, lowering his head. Yes, sir. He passed away last month. Cancer. He fought hard, but... His voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Richard buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by grief and regret. For years, he had assumed James wanted nothing to do with him. He had convinced himself that his brother preferred exile over reconciliation. But now, holding the crumpled envelope containing proof of Isaac's identity, Richard realized the truth. James had never stopped caring about him. He had sent Isaac here because he believed Richard would protect him. After a long moment, Richard composed himself enough to speak. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have reached out sooner. I should have done more. Isaac shook his head quickly. Dad didn't blame you, he assured him. He always said you were busy building your empire. He just hoped we'd meet someday. Those words struck Richard like a dagger. Busy building his empire. Was that really all his life amounted to? A collection of restaurants, properties, and bank accounts. Where had his priorities gone wrong? Here was his nephew, his own flesh and blood, and he hadn't even known he existed until today. Determined to make amends, Richard turned to the manager. Cancel my evening plans, he instructed firmly. I'm staying here tonight, and from now on, Isaac will stay with me. The manager nodded vigorously, eager to comply. Of course, Mr. Harrison. Whatever you need. Richard then turned, his attention back to Isaac. Come on, son, he said gently, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Let's get you settled in. We have a lot to talk about. As they exited the office together, the entire staff lined up in the hallway, watching silently as Richard led Isaac toward the elevator. Gone was the hostility they had shown earlier. Instead, there was a palpable sense of shame hanging in the air. Each employee avoided making eye contact with Isaac, acutely aware of how horribly they had misjudged him. Once inside the elevator, Richard glanced down at Isaac and smiled warmly. You must be hungry, he said. How about we grab something? To eat upstairs? Just you and me. Isaac grinned for the first time since arriving at the restaurant. That sounds great, Uncle Richard. Upstairs in Richard's private penthouse suite, the two shared a quiet meal while getting to know each other better. Isaac talked about his life with his father, their struggles, their adventures, and the lessons his dad had taught him along the way. Richard listened intently, marveling at the resilience and maturity of this young boy who had endured so much at such a tender age. As the night wore on, Richard couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, he had built an empire, but now he had a chance to build something far more meaningful, a family. Back at the restaurant, the staff gathered in hushed tones discussing what had transpired. None of them dared to admit aloud how wrong they had been, but the lesson was clear. Appearances could deceive and assumptions could harm. From that day forward, the Gilded Fork would never be the same again. Not for its employees, not for its guests, and certainly not for Isaac. The next morning, news of Isaac's arrival spread like wildfire through the Gilded Fork. Employees whispered in corners, sharing snippets of what they had witnessed the previous night. Some recounted how Richard Harrison had personally escorted Isaac out of the restaurant, his arm protectively around the boy's shoulders. Others described the look of guilt etched on their boss's face as he realized the magnitude of his estrangement from his brother and the opportunity he had missed to reconnect. By breakfast time, the story had taken on a life of its own. Speculation ran rampant. Was Isaac truly the heir to half of Richard Harrison's fortune? How would this affect the restaurant's operations? And most importantly, how could they have been so blind to misjudge him? For many of the staff, the guilt was overwhelming. The hostess who had initially turned Isaac away replayed the encounter in her mind over and over again. She remembered the dismissive tone she had used, the way she had judged him based solely on his clothes. It made her stomach churn with shame. The maitre d', too, couldn't shake off the memory of his sharp words. This isn't some playground. He cringed every time he thought about it. Even the waiter who had muttered sarcastically about kids thinking fame runs in the family felt a pang of regret. What if Isaac had walked away that night, refusing to return? Would they have ever known the truth? Or worse, would Richard Harrison have found out about their behavior and decided to hold them accountable? As the day progressed, rumors reached the ears of senior management. By noon, Richard himself called an emergency meeting in the restaurant's main dining hall. Every employee, from chefs to servers to cleaning staff, was required to attend. The room buzzed with nervous energy as everyone took their seats, unsure of what to expect. When Richard entered the room, the chatter immediately died down. Dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray suit, he carried himself with the same authority that commanded respect from everyone in the building. But today, there was something different about him. His usual stern expression was softened by a hint of vulnerability, as though he were carrying the weight of recent events on his shoulders. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I've gathered you all here because I believe transparency is important, especially after what happened last night." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Many of you may already know that the young boy who came to us yesterday, Isaac, is my nephew. He is the son of my late brother James, whom I lost touch with many years ago. Isaac has come into my life at a difficult time, and I intend to honor my brother's wishes by taking care of him." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Richard raised a hand to silence them. "However," he continued, his tone growing firmer, "what concerns me more than anything else is how Isaac was treated when he first arrived." The room fell deathly quiet. Employees exchanged uneasy glances, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Richard scanned the crowd, his piercing blue eyes locking onto each person in turn. "I want to make one thing very clear," he said, his voice rising slightly. "This restaurant prides itself on being exclusive, yes, but exclusivity does not mean elitism. It does not mean turning away someone simply because they don't fit our preconceived notions of wealth or status. True class is not about judging others. It's about treating everyone with kindness, humility, and respect." His words struck a nerve. Several employees hung their heads in shame, unable to meet his gaze. Richard let the silence linger for a moment before softening his tone. "Now, I'm not saying this to punish anyone," he added. "We're human, and mistakes happen. But moving forward, I expect better from all of you. From this point onward, we will implement new policies to ensure that every guest, regardless of appearance, is welcomed warmly. If anyone has doubts about whether someone belongs here, they are to bring it directly to me or the manager. No exceptions." With that, Richard dismissed the meeting, leaving the staff to process his message. For some, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that their actions had consequences. For others, it was a humbling lesson in empathy and compassion. Later that afternoon, Isaac returned to the Gilded Fork with Richard. This time, however, the atmosphere was markedly different. As soon as he stepped through the golden doors, the hostess greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome back, Mr. Harrison," she said, addressing him formally. "Your uncle is waiting for you upstairs." Isaac blinked in surprise. "Thank you," he replied politely, still adjusting to the sudden change in treatment. Upstairs, Richard had arranged for a small tour of the restaurant's operations. He wanted Isaac to understand the business he might one day inherit. They started in the kitchen where the head chef, an imposing figure with a booming voice, welcomed Isaac warmly. "This is where the magic happens," the chef said, gesturing toward the bustling team of cooks preparing dishes with precision and flair. "Every plate that leaves this kitchen represents hours of hard work and dedication." Isaac watched in awe as fresh ingredients were transformed into culinary masterpieces. The aroma of herbs and spices filled the air, making his mouth water. Despite his humble upbringing, Isaac had always appreciated good food, and seeing the process firsthand fascinated him. Next, they visited the wine cellar, a cavernous room lined with shelves stocked with bottles from around the world. The sommelier explained the art of pairing wines with different dishes, offering Isaac a crash course in oenology. Though much of it went over his head, Isaac listened intently, eager to learn. Throughout the tour, employees approached Isaac to apologize for their earlier behavior. Each apology was sincere, and Isaac accepted them graciously, never once holding a grudge. His forgiving nature only deepened the staff's admiration for him. By the end of the day, Isaac felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. Here, surrounded by people who were beginning to see him for who he truly was, he found solace. And for Richard, having Isaac by his side rekindled a part of him he thought he had lost long ago, the desire to nurture and protect those he loved. That evening, as they sat together in Richard's penthouse suite, Isaac looked up at his uncle with gratitude. "Thank you for everything, Uncle Richard," he said softly. "I didn't think I'd find a place where I belong, but now I do." Richard smiled, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. "You'll always belong here, Isaac. Your family." And, with those simple words, a bond was forged, one that would shape both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Over the next few weeks, life at the Gilded Fork underwent a transformation, not just for Isaac and Richard, but for every employee who worked there. The story of the boy who had walked into the restaurant wearing worn-out sneakers and a faded hoodie became the talk of the town. It wasn't long before newspapers and social media picked up on the tale, turning it into a modern-day lesson on humility, assumptions, and redemption. For Isaac, adjusting to his new life was both exciting and overwhelming. One day, he was living in a small apartment with his father, struggling to make ends meet. The next, he was being introduced to the world of luxury and privilege as the nephew of one of New York City's wealthiest men. Despite the sudden change in circumstances, Isaac remained grounded. His father's teachings had instilled in him a strong sense of gratitude and resilience, qualities that helped him navigate this unfamiliar territory. Richard, too, found himself changing in ways he hadn't anticipated. For years, his focus had been solely on expanding his empire, opening new restaurants, acquiring properties, and increasing his wealth. But now, with Isaac by his side, he began to see things differently. Success, he realized, wasn't just about accumulating riches. It was about building meaningful relationships and leaving a legacy that mattered. To help Isaac settle in, Richard enrolled him in an elite private school, ensuring he received the best education possible. He also hired a tutor to assist Isaac with catching up on subjects he had missed during frequent moves with his father. At first, Isaac felt out of place among his wealthy classmates, many of whom drove expensive cars and wore designer clothes. But over time, he earned their respect through his kindness, intelligence, and genuine interest in others. His teachers noted his eagerness to learn and described him as a remarkable young man with a bright future ahead. Meanwhile, back at the Gilded Fork, the staff worked tirelessly to implement Richard's new policies. Gone were the days when customers were judged based on their appearance or attire. Instead, the restaurant adopted a more inclusive approach, welcoming everyone with open arms. Employees underwent sensitivity training sessions designed to teach them the importance of treating all guests equally, regardless of their background. The hostess who had initially turned Isaac away became one of the most vocal advocates for these changes, often reminding her colleagues of the lessons they had learned. One evening, during a particularly busy dinner service, the impact of these efforts became evident. A group of tourists entered the restaurant dressed casually in jeans and sneakers. In the past, they might have been turned away without a second thought. But this time, the staff greeted them warmly, offering them a table near the window with a stunning view of the city skyline. As they enjoyed their meal, one of the tourists, a middle-aged woman, approached the manager to express her gratitude. "We weren't sure if we'd be allowed in," she admitted, tears glistening in her eyes. "But your team made us feel So welcome. Thank you for giving us such a wonderful experience. The manager smiled, recalling Richard's words from the emergency meeting. True class is not about judging others. It's about kindness, humility, and respect. These values had become the foundation upon which the Gilded Fork operated, earning it even greater acclaim than before. As months passed, Isaac grew closer to Richard, forging a bond that neither of them had expected. On weekends, they spent hours exploring the city together, visiting museums, attending concerts, and dining at various restaurants. During these outings, Richard shared stories about his childhood, painting a picture of the close-knit family he and James had once been part of. He spoke fondly of their adventures as kids, from building tree houses in their backyard to sneaking into movies without tickets. Listening to these tales, Isaac felt a deeper connection to the uncle he barely knew. In return, Isaac opened up about his own experiences growing up with his father. He talked about the sacrifices his dad had made to provide for him, the odd jobs he had taken to pay the rent, and the countless nights they had spent laughing over homemade meals. Through these conversations, Richard came to understand the depth of his brother's love for his son, and the responsibility he now carried to ensure Isaac's happiness. One Saturday afternoon, while browsing through old photo albums at Richard's penthouse, Isaac stumbled upon a picture of his father as a teenager. In the photograph, James stood beside Richard, both of them grinning ear to ear. Seeing the image brought tears to Isaac's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. For the first time since losing his dad, he felt a sense of closure, a reassurance that his father's memory would live on through the bond he was forming with Richard. Despite the progress they had made, challenges still lay ahead. Managing a multi-billion-dollar empire alongside raising a teenage nephew was no easy task, and Richard often found himself torn between work and family obligations. There were moments when Isaac struggled to adapt to his new lifestyle, feeling like an outsider in a world that seemed so far removed from the one he had known. But through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their shared grief and determination to honor James's legacy. At school, Isaac faced his own set of hurdles. While most of his classmates accepted him, there were a few who mocked him for his humble beginnings. Rumors spread about how he had charmed his way into Richard's life, with some suggesting he was only pretending to be related to the billionaire. But Isaac refused to let these comments affect him. Instead, he channeled his energy into excelling academically and pursuing extracurricular activities that interested him. His hard work paid off when he was selected to represent his school in a prestigious debate competition. Standing on stage, delivering his arguments with confidence and poise, Isaac proved to everyone, including himself, that he belonged exactly where he was. When he won first place, Richard beamed with pride, knowing that his nephew's success was a testament to his perseverance and character. Back at the Gilded Fork, the staff continued to embrace the changes Richard had implemented. The restaurant became known not just for its exquisite cuisine but also for its warm hospitality. Guests praised the attentive service and inviting atmosphere, leading to glowing reviews and increased bookings. Employees, inspired by Isaac's humility and grace, strived to embody those same qualities in their interactions with customers. One evening, as the restaurant buzzed with activity, the hostess approached Isaac, who was sitting quietly in a corner booth working on his homework. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "Your presence here has reminded us of what truly matters." Isaac looked up, surprised by her words. "Thank you?" he repeated, confused. She nodded. "Yes. You've taught us that appearances can be deceiving and that everyone deserves a chance to tell their story. We're better because of you." Touched by her sincerity, Isaac smiled. "I didn't do anything special," he replied modestly. "I just followed my dad's advice. He always said to treat people the way you want to be treated." Her eyes welled up with tears and she reached out to give him a quick hug. "Well, your dad must have been an amazing man," she said, "and so are you." As the weeks turned into months, Isaac and Richard built a life filled with laughter, love, and mutual respect. Though they couldn't turn back time and undo the years of estrangement between Richard and James, They found comfort in knowing they had each other now. Together, they honored James's memory by creating a future rooted in kindness, understanding, and unwavering support. And so, what had begun as a humiliating encounter at the Gilded Fork blossomed into a story of redemption, forgiveness, and second chances, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys start with the simplest acts of courage and faith. As time went on, Isaac's presence at the Gilded Fork became a source of inspiration for everyone around him. His quiet confidence and humility reminded employees and patrons alike that true worth wasn't measured by wealth or appearance, but by the content of one's character. For Richard Harrison, having Isaac in his life brought about a profound transformation, not just personally, but professionally as well. Richard had always been driven by ambition, constantly chasing the next big project or financial milestone, but now, with Isaac by his side, he began to focus on something far more meaningful, building a legacy that would outlast his empire. He realized that success wasn't just about accumulating riches. It was about leaving behind a world better than he found it. And who better to share this vision with than his nephew? One evening, as they sat together in Richard's penthouse suite, overlooking the glittering skyline of New York City, Richard turned to Isaac with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "I've spent my entire life building restaurants and businesses, but lately I've been thinking, maybe it's time to use those resources for something bigger." Isaac looked up from the book he was reading, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Richard leaned back in his chair, gazing out at the city lights. "Well, your dad always believed in giving back to the community. He used to volunteer at shelters and food banks when we were kids. I think it's time I followed his example, and yours." Isaac's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing, Uncle Richard. What did you have in mind?" Richard smiled, pleased by Isaac's enthusiasm. "How about we start a foundation? Something that helps kids like you, kids who've lost a parent and need support to get back on their feet. We could provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and even housing assistance." The idea resonated deeply with Isaac. Growing up without a mother and later losing his father had taught him how difficult life could be without a strong support system. Knowing that others might benefit from such an initiative filled him with hope. "I'd love to help," he said earnestly. "It's exactly what Dad would have wanted." With Isaac's blessing, Richard wasted no time putting the plan into action. Within weeks, he announced the launch of the James Harrison Foundation, named in honor of his late brother. The foundation aimed to empower underprivileged children and families, offering them the tools and opportunities they needed to succeed. To kick things off, Richard donated a significant portion of his fortune to fund scholarships and build community centers across the country. The announcement sent ripples through the media, earning widespread praise for its altruistic mission. Celebrities, philanthropists, and local leaders rallied behind the cause, pledging their support. Even former skeptics within the Gilded Fork staff felt a renewed sense of pride in working for a man who was using his wealth to make a difference. Meanwhile, Isaac continued to thrive in his new environment. At school, he excelled academically and socially, earning the respect of both his peers and teachers. His debate team victories became a regular occurrence, and he was often invited to speak at events hosted by the foundation. Though initially hesitant to take center stage, Isaac soon embraced his role as an advocate for disadvantaged youth, sharing his own story to inspire others. One particularly memorable event took place at a gala organized by the James Harrison Foundation. Held at the Gilded Fork itself, the evening brought together some of the city's most influential figures, all gathered to celebrate the foundation's achievements over the past year. As Richard stood at the podium addressing the crowd, he paused to introduce Isaac, who had been quietly sitting in the front row. "This young man is the reason we're here tonight," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "His courage and resilience remind us all of what it means to overcome adversity. Please welcome my nephew and the heart of this foundation, Isaac Harrison." The room erupted in applause as Isaac stepped onto the stage, visibly nervous but determined. Clutching the microphone with both hands, he took a deep breath before beginning his speech. "When I first came to the Gilded Fork, I didn't expect Anyone to believe me, he admitted, his voice steady despite the sea of faces staring back at him. But my dad always told me to trust in kindness and never give up. Thanks to him, and to my uncle, I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you when you need them most. He paused, glancing toward Richard, who gave him an encouraging nod. That's why I'm so proud of what we're doing with this foundation. It's not just about helping kids, it's about showing them that they matter. That no matter where they come from or what they look like, they deserve a chance to shine. The time Isaac finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Guests approached him afterward, shaking his hand and thanking him for his words. Some shared their own stories of loss and hardship, while others pledged generous donations to the foundation. It was clear that Isaac's message had struck a chord, reminding everyone present of the power of compassion and perseverance. As the months passed, the James Harrison Foundation grew exponentially, impacting countless lives across the nation. Community centers sprang up in underserved neighborhoods, providing safe spaces for children to learn, play, and grow. Scholarships enabled talented students to pursue higher education, breaking cycles of poverty and opening doors to brighter futures. Mentorship programs connected struggling teens with successful professionals willing to guide and inspire them. For Isaac, seeing the foundation's impact firsthand was incredibly rewarding. He visited several of the centers regularly, spending time with the kids and listening to their dreams. Many of them reminded him of himself, resilient, hopeful, and eager to make something of their lives. In turn, they looked up to him as a role model, someone who had faced challenges and emerged stronger on the other side. At the Gilded Fork, the staff continued to embody the values Richard had instilled in them. The restaurant became known not only for its exceptional food, but also for its commitment to inclusivity and generosity. Employees volunteered their time at foundation events, serving meals and organizing fundraisers. Customers, too, got involved, donating portions of their bills to charitable causes supported by the foundation. Even the hostess who had once dismissed Isaac with disdain became one of the foundation's most dedicated volunteers. She often accompanied Isaac on visits to the community centers, marveling at how much she had learned from him. "You've changed all of us for the better," she told him during one such visit. "Thank you for teaching us to see beyond appearances." Isaac simply smiled. "We're all learning together," he replied. "That's what makes this journey so special." Years later, as Isaac prepared to graduate from college, he reflected on how far he had come since that fateful night at the Gilded Fork. From a shy boy clutching an envelope to a confident young man leading a movement for change, his transformation had been nothing short of extraordinary. Along the way, he had discovered the true meaning of family, not just in bloodlines, but in the connections forged through love, understanding, and shared purpose. Richard watched proudly as Isaac delivered his valedictorian speech at graduation, knowing that his nephew's future was bright. Together they had built something greater than either of them could have imagined, a legacy rooted in kindness, empathy, and hope. And so, what had begun as a humiliating encounter in a luxury restaurant ended as a tale of redemption, unity, and second chances, a testament to the fact that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can spark the greatest transformations.